This morning I want to talk to you about paradoxes. Paradox is a true statement that seems impossible because it contains opposing facts. And the example I want to give to start with is what's known as the Astley paradox. The 80s singer-songwriter Rick Astley. And the scenario is this. Now, Rick Astley has a very large movie collection. One of these movies is the Disney Pixar movie Up. I'm not a Disney fan particularly, but I have watched this movie and I really like it. So suppose that I was to ask Rick Astley if I could borrow this movie. In the words of his hit song, Rick is never going to give me up. But in doing so, he's going to let me down, which is the promise he gives in the second line. So those two statements can't be true. Rick is never going to give me up, but he is going to let me down. Or he will give me up, and then he won't let me down. So there's the paradox. Two statements that seem true, but seem impossible. Now, obviously, that's a fictitious example. And that's where the word seem is important, because when we look at a paradox, it is something that we need to try and understand. We need to look into. It's a seeming contradiction. It's something that is difficult to understand. It is something that there are two truths. There are lots of paradoxes in the Bible. And as we've been studying Paul's letter to the Ephesians, I've been coming across many of them. And in a sense, it's not surprising because we, with our finite minds, are trying to understand the infinite God. We can't comprehend his ways. And it's something that great theologians have struggled with. Martin Luther famously labelled the book of James as the epistle of straw. And it's that paradox that he struggled with, that relationship between faith and works. On the one hand, I've gone on too far, we're saved by faith alone, not by anything that we do. But on the other hand, faith, James tells us that faith without works is dead. Obviously, Luther took hold of that first truth because coming from the Catholic Church, which was preaching the salvation of works, he focused on the faith. So when struggled with James's teaching on the second, that faith without works is dead. Now we see this particular paradox in the book of Ephesians in chapter 2, verses 8 to 10, which says this: "For it is by grace you have been saved, through faith. This is not of yourselves, it is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared for us in advance to do." Verse 8 tells us it's faith alone. Verse 9 reinforces that it's not by works. But verse 10 tells us that we are created to do good works. If we put our faith for our salvation, this has an impact on our lives, and works are the outcome of that faith. So very briefly, I just want to share a few thoughts on that. Firstly, look at, well, what does it mean by works? Notice this is for every Christian. This is what we're created for. Paul doesn't make any distinction. It's not some Christians, so it's not for the missionaries, the pastors, the elders. This is for everyone. We're all saved by faith, and we're all created to do good works. Secondly, well, what are works? It's not the glamour jobs. It's not the preaching, pastoring, evangelism. These are works, but it's not just that. It's making tea. It's cleaning the toilets. It's giving a lift. It's prayer. It's helping someone with a problem. It's chatting to a neighbour. It's being a friend. In Matthew 25, Jesus' parable describes acts of righteousness. He talks about seeing hungry and feeding them, the thirsty and giving them a drink, a stranger and inviting them in, someone needing clothes and clothing them. Those are the works that we do. And in a sense, we don't need to look any further than what Jesus did in his years of ministry. Yes, he taught the crowds, but he had compassion on them. He saw them and he had compassion. He taught, he fed, he healed. And those are the things that we can take from Jesus. Now, just as I've been thinking about this since Mick looked at that passage a few weeks ago, I was really focusing on the verse 10 and the fact that God prepared us. God has planned good works for us to do. He has prepared us to do good works. We're God's workmanship, created to do the works that he's given us. So God doesn't give us something that we're not going to have the ability to do. He's not setting us up to fail. It's a very slightly different context to this, but Jesus uses the example in prayer that a son asking a father for bread. Will the father give him a stone? Well, the principle here is that God is gracious, a gracious and loving father. He prepares us for the works that he's going to give us. So he gives us works to do. He's created us to do them. And he prepares us and gives us the gifts and the strength to do them. Now, work obviously implies something that's difficult. And living the Christian life can be a challenge. It can be something that sometimes stretches us. But God is always with us. Jesus' promise to those who come to him is to take my yoke upon you, learn from me, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. There's a paradox there again, isn't there? Yoke is a work, a labour. It's from oxen and the ploughing and the two oxen together. So the older oxen was providing the strength, the experience and the leadership and the direction. And Jesus is there alongside us, sharing our load and teaching us. So as we reflect on our work as Christians in the church and as individuals, as we seek to live lives which are worthy of the calling God has given us, as we try to witness to those around us and share God's love with those around us, let's not forget that this is God's work that he's prepared for us. He's there guiding us, giving us the strength to carry it out.